The beauty of an open source system that is crypto is that ideas get discovered faster because you're building in the open and money moves at the speed of light. And at that intersection, you are just going to create remarkable things. My vision is that over the next 10 years, every private equity fund will be leveraging crypto to drive value in their portfolio. And if they're not, they're likely going to go out of business or not raise as much money, and the returns will degrade. Instead of trying to convince mobile carrier that they should use stablecoins and become a bank, I'm just going to buy one with a large user base at a very attractive price because they have shitty margins. I get a low multiple on that, and then I run this playbook. The tech is ready. We can absorb a launch of a presidential meme coin on the weekend and absorb that volume and on-ramping, but the retention's not there. We can offer them way more than a meme coin. We're selling ourselves short so much in this industry. DePIN plus stablecoins, it's the 1-2 punch that will take us to the promised land, which is accelerate the adoption of this technology in a way that is unequivocally proves to people that this is what we've been telling them it will be.
Welcome back to the Allocators podcast. We are very excited today to have Santiago Santos on with us to talk about his new PE fund, DePIN, Helium, a lot of different things. I'm joined by Mahesh, who's my co-host. And Santi, I want to start by actually asking you the question of, how's it feel to be on the other side of a podcast? You've been the co-host for Empire, which is one of crypto's biggest podcasts for a long time. So yeah, what's the backstory there? Like how long you've been doing it for? What do you enjoy about it?
Yeah, when I left Para5 almost over 4 years ago, I felt that the thing that the industry needed the most was pure education. Not without selling, like without any interest, just not promote anything, not a coin, not telling you what to buy, what to sell, just, would be a space where people can come in and learn about the industry. And unfortunately, most of the journey that people have on crypto is you hear about someone had made a lot of money on a particular coin, whether it was Bitcoin or Trump or everything in the middle, and they just go straight head on, dive deep, and want to go straight to the exchange and buy something. And I felt that there's just so much more interesting things about this space. I mean, crypto and the journey, like I would almost want to go back and relive my crypto journey from the very inception because it is just been like peeling a onion layer of understanding even the most basic things. How does money work? What gives value to things? Like, crypto is such a multidisciplinary field. Think about it is cryptography, distributed systems, open source technology, force the internet, how the internet happened, security, anthropology, sociology, political systems, like economics, game theory, and the list goes on and on and on. And so I think like I always tell people at minimum, I'm not asking you to buy Bitcoin or any asset. Just take an interest in this movement and technology because it will force you to think and update your priors on how you think the world works. And I think that's very valuable for anyone. Whether you decide at the end of that journey, which I don't think ever ends, you want to buy something or not, I actually think that's the least interesting thing.
No, I totally agree. It's like a common gripe I come back to all the time, which is, society as a whole is so obsessed with trying to put things into a box as quickly as possible because in the history of the world, that's like how we understand anything is we put it in a box, we understand how the box works, and then we, for the rest of time, associate whatever set of activity is with, the narrow set of things that we associate with that box. And the thing about crypto that's just incredible, and I've found exactly the same thing, is like we're actually just architecting society from the ground up. I mean, one of the books that gets quoted a lot and that I obviously love is Atlas Shrugged, and it has this whole idea of Galt's Gulch, i.e., a new society kind of being built in parallel to everything else. And I'm constantly interested and impressed with like just the novelty of some of the ideas that I tend to find in the space, and a lot of those came through Empire. So what you guys are doing there is definitely interesting from a product perspective. But, it also just, I think, goes to broadly one of the things I admire about you guys, which is like whether it's you or Blockworks, I mean, you guys are like constantly willing to go against the grain in like a really big way. I mean, thinking about Blockworks to begin with, whether it was podcasting as a platform versus maybe what the Bankless guys were doing, although maybe there's a little bit of a synergy there. But, my question for you is, how do you find the conviction, to take these massive, big swings? In times when, maybe the rest of the world seems like it's running the other way?
Well, at a very personal level, I think there was a point in my life where I just woke up and I was investing in open source software and I said, I don't want to invest in the next CRM. Just didn't move the needle as much. Is it important technology? Absolutely. Can you make money? Absolutely. But I'll trade being more relevant I'll always make the trade whether you can be more relevant or make more money after a certain threshold. I'll always trade being more relevant. And I think that I think that was one of the biggest insights I had in my journey. And look, I was lucky enough. I had a very privileged upbringing. I wish that everyone had that possibility to not have to think about putting food on the table and getting education and having access to knowledge, which is more and more so open sourced. And that is one of the most beautiful things about the internet, something like Wikipedia. But yeah, I think like it just is like, is what I'm doing giving me meaning? And I've just find myself incredibly at awe. Like there's not a day that doesn't go by that I think of, wow, I'm incredibly lucky that I've discovered an industry that I think is the most important socioeconomic transformation of our time, combined with the opportunity to be able to make a positive contribution to this industry and seeing it not just what I can do and I'm able to do through investing or through the podcast, but also seeing it in other people. Like the beauty of an open source system that is crypto is that ideas get discovered faster because you're building in the open and money moves at the speed of light. And at that intersection, you are just going to create remarkable things. Now, not all of it is going to be great. It's like when you go and walk around, imagine most of the time there's scaffolding and the building is sort of being built behind the scenes, and then you only see the World Trade Center unveiled, you know? The problem, both the challenge and and the beauty about open source systems is that you're seeing the guts and the plumbing and everything being built in real time. And that's sort of the analogy that I draw when I think about like crypto as an industry is it perfect? No. Do we have a lot of bad parts and actors in the industry? Yes. Is it uniquely inherent to crypto? Absolutely not. But you just see it more visibly. Um, is it always easy to believe that this is the most impactful socioeconomic transformation of our generation? Absolutely not. But something you said I do believe in, which is I feel that I'm earlier today than I was 12 years ago when I discovered Bitcoin. There's just something that hits you very deeply when you start seeing things working. And we're going to go into that in this episode, deep in stablecoins, uh, like high throughput blockchains, the political 180 turnaround. Um, like there's so many things, but also more importantly, like people might be challenging what I just said and say, wait a minute, what about AI? That surely must be more impactful than crypto. I would challenge that to say, um, no, because crypto touches a really human element, which is a coordination as species. Like that is very unique by crypto, like uniquely enabled by crypto. And the most impactful pieces of technology throughout the history of mankind have been allowing us to coordinate better as social species that we are. And the second point is AI requires digital infrastructure. None of the infrastructure today, which is finance, is digital, has not caught up to the digital world. Crypto is digital infrastructure for AI, and AI works better with crypto. And so for that reason, I think that crypto is more important than AI.
Absolutely. No, look, I think one of the things I love about how you think about this is, part of it is there's an economic lens, there's a psychological lens, there's an anthropological lens, maybe there's a piece of history as well. And I'm also a big believer in this idea that, if you nail those like fundamental factors in terms of how society is changing, sort of everything else follows. But, I used to be an investor at Apollo, had a background sort of in private equity before. And it was always crazy to me that, like, the way most capital by like dollars think about investing and finance and just all of this stuff is it's like optimizing six numbers on a spreadsheet. And it's always been just insane to me that like people can make these massive, life-changing decisions on the basis of, the output of those six numbers. I'm a big believer that like looking at the consequential nature of not just like the technology itself, but how it impacts society is kind of the best determinant of on a 5 to 10 year basis, as you were kind of saying, like, is this actually going to get more important, or am I going to feel earlier even over time? Because just like the scope of how much is there to be built is actually so much greater than anyone realized. But my question to you in all of that is that how you've always approached investing? Because, you obviously have a background across finance, and I think you were pretty senior at Parify as well and super early there. Um, but has that mentality changed over time, or how did you kind of get to where you got to today in terms of how you see the world?
Yeah, no, look, when I was early on at JP Morgan, you just want to, make a make a name for yourself and like get educated on how to think about investing at SageView, which was the growth equity fund started by KKR folks. I went to that really was very formative in how I thought about investing. Like at JP Morgan, you're doing a model and you have 100,000 things in the model and you have 200-page decks and like you want to cover everything. And SageView was a place where they took a lot of time and interest in my education. And the biggest learning I had there was saying, no, 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 no. Like I remember the first investment committee that I went to, they're like, I don't care about 200-page deck. Why are we going to make or lose money on this deal? One thing, or maybe two, at best three, not 10. And so you just really need to focus on that. And then you overlay that, this idea that you're never going to build a perfect model. There's just so much information and imperfect information. The best you can do is narrow it down to the things that you can control, identify things that you're never going to control, and then build enough margin of safety to say, this is going to be wrong. It is wrong right now. But what are the things that we need to constantly be validating and processing to make sure that we're going to, make this a great investment? Um, and so I think like that was very instructive in how I thought about the world. And then combined with a personal family event where my middle sister just was sick, for me, that was very, again, going back to this idea of like doing things that gave me meaning. I wanted to, it coincided with me discovering crypto and really growing up in Mexico. I mean, I appreciate it. There's a lot of inequality in the world. The financial system works kind of okay in the US, is either non-existent or a total ripoff everywhere
Yeah.
else. And so it was just like, as an investor, like the question that I perhaps this has been consistent throughout is like in your day-to-day interaction. People ask me like, how do you know you're an investor? I'm like, I'll tell you why. Walk into the supermarket, the doctor's appointment, book a flight, in whatever interaction you're having throughout the day, there's going to be some friction. And you're going to be left wondering, there ought to be a better way to do this. Because you juxtapose that with the seamless experience that you have on Amazon or Instagram or ordering stuff or turning on the TV. Shit should be invisible.
Yeah.
Like, leave me alone. I want to live my life and spend quality time thinking or with my loved ones. I don't want all these bells and whistles that all these products require you to do today, which I think we've gone too far out on that spectrum. Is like, I get it. We're living in a digital age, but like some things never change. And like Morgan Housel's book of like some things never change is so, so good because it's like, at the end of the day, we want to just enjoy our time in this world and have fun and live it with the people that we enjoy. Like technology should be invisible. And I think that that is the end state of crypto. We should be developing things that are totally invisible where, people ask you, so what is this crypto thing? I'm like, Bitcoin is the least interesting thing about this technology. I want you in 5 years' time, what I'm doing at Inversion is so that people can use their phone and perhaps none of the apps might change, but they will feel the impact. They might not know how it works, but they will feel that the impact of crypto Rails powering a lot of the applications in that phone. And so when you go to that Thanksgiving dinner or you meet your new brother-in-law or mother-in-law and they'll ask you what you do, you're like, yeah, I just work in this thing called crypto. But by the way, all the apps in your phone, yeah. You notice that your interest rate is lower, that your bank application didn't take days, it took, minutes. You appreciate that you have more access to products and services, that you might make a new living off of this industry. That's the shit that really matters. We're not there yet, but we're close.
Totally agree. It's an interesting thing, every time I have a new family dinner, it's almost like the incremental question comes up of like, what is the progress? What can I use? What can I do? Um, I'd be curious kind of because, you've obviously been a pretty prominent figure in the space for some time. Like, in the context of those conversations, like, are there things that on a repeated basis work? Sound bites that, really get people's heads around what you're doing and what we're all doing and why it's so interesting. I guess said differently, have you been able to convince your mother that what we're doing is like really the future?
Yeah, so it was great because Ben Pair 5 is listening. He'll appreciate this. We really struggled to get raised money at Pair. Like at the early days, we were like talking about DeFi, and people were like, "What? Like, what is this?" Like before DeFi was a thing. And then we inverted and we said, "All right." In the calls with the potential LPs, we said, "Hey, listen, go, through your Coinbase account, use this thing called USDC to send money. Do that, go through that flow, and then come back to me and tell me if you really want to do a wire transfer anymore." And 9 out of 10 times they were committed to the fund. I mean, like, we could just stop there with stablecoins, and this will be at least a $10 trillion industry. You know what I mean? Like we don't. I think like as an industry, we come at it from a position of being defensive because you get attacked. Like, oh, cryptos, you're either the most popular or the least popular person at a party at any given moment's time in the cycle. Um, but most of the time, it's trying to justify our existence, and I think it's not the right mindset or approach. We don't need to justify the existence of this technology to anyone. We need to show it. I think that's where we've fallen short because it is very abstract. Mind you, this is not a problem with crypto. This is a problem of every early piece of technology that is kind of indistinguishable from magic. The internet, go back to 2002. You have Bill Gates on public television saying that the internet is going to be transformational. And you had him, like the anchor, laughing him out of the room. That was not too long ago. People dismiss smartphones. I mean, that's inherently how super powerful technology works. But yeah, the sound bites that really resonate with people are, um, telling them about the stable coins and what that allows them to do. Um, but then perhaps even more so just inverting and saying and really exposing the problems that exist in the traditional world and they can all relate to. And I think that's just sort of this where people are more receptive saying, okay, this is how you fix my problem. And I said, absolutely. I'm not going to necessarily explain to you all the minutia or all the details. I'm just saying that I will show you that this will be fixed and it will be fixed probably far faster than what you think. And the solution to that is the thing that you think about crypto, which is volatile and scammy and a digital casino. And I get it, but you know, it will happen. So that those are the things that really resonate with people. But candidly, I just got tired of trying to explain this stuff to people. I mean, I've been sitting on a chair on a podcast with Empire to Left Parify, and I love what I do. I think it gives me a lot of meaning. Um, I would do it if it helped one person. I hope it has helped more, but just impacting one person and allowing them to like take that leap into that crypto journey that we talked about, that's good enough. But I think we're at a point in as an industry that we really should rally behind showing what this technology can do. And that is the insight that I had, and what I want to do with Inversion, which is I know how to do private equity. Why am I trying to convince a business to use crypto rails? I know that the impact can be felt and had to streamline the operations of that company. They're not going to believe it necessarily. So I'm like, why am I trying to convince it? I just want to buy. I'm just, there's another way to do this, which is I go and buy that business and do it myself. And I think like that's what gets me really excited now, which is this is, as I said, a next chapter in what I'm trying to have the most amount of impact in this industry. And success for me is in 2 years time, I buy a particular business that has a 5% EBITDA margin. Within a year or two, that business goes to 15 to 20% EBITDA margin. And everyone in Wall Street says, wait a minute, what have you done here? And I said, literally one thing. I didn't grow top line. I did one thing, and that was crypto rails. And they're like, oh, I like this. And you said, yeah, I've been telling you that this is a settlement layer of the internet. Is the internet on steroids, but you didn't listen. And I get it. And so that's what we need to do as an industry. That is what gets me incredibly fired up to what I'm doing at Inversion. And I hope the people listening here, it is a lot of work. I'm not trying to downplay it of this, like, oh, you're taking a business from 5 to 20. There's a lot of work, but it is predicated on insights that I've had from being in this space long enough, investing in over 200 portfolio companies and saying, yeah, like you go see Helium, you go see Andrina, you go see these DePIN projects. That's interesting. The quality of the founders are high. And there's no reason why we shouldn't have those services shouldn't have 100 times more users than they have today. It's a go-to-market problem.
I'm curious, like mentally, maybe mentally, maybe emotionally, like you've been an investor most of your career. Now you're a founder. All the responsibilities on you at Inversion Capital. If you don't do something, it doesn't get done, at least for now, until you hire out a team. So what's that kind of mental and maybe even like an emotional shift been like for you? And how has it changed kind of your day to day?
Well, like, oh, that's an excellent question. There's a lot. I'd be lying if I didn't tell you there's a lot of self-doubt. A lot. I'm like, am I going to be able to do this? I didn't see myself as a builder necessarily. As an investor, you're sort of led to believe that you're not a builder. And I think that's the biggest lie that I was told over the last 20 plus years of my investing career. You are very much doing the same thing, which is you are talking to a founder and you are assessing if that person is going to build value and drive through a wall to make it a success. And oftentimes an investor is a therapist. And I think my role in this organization will be to inspire far more competent people to rally behind this mission and make sure that I am there and inspire them to bring out the best output and be the best versions of themselves. As an organization, to lead, I think that's what it will make this a success. And I think that's not too dissimilar from what you're doing as an investor, especially in early stage. It's been incredibly rewarding. I'll tell you just now, like over the last 9 months or so that I've been on this journey, it's already been incredibly rewarding because, I mean, there's not a day that doesn't go by that I have this doubt. I'm just gonna say it because most of the times, like if this is a wild success, I want the record to show that yeah, there's a lot of doubt, for sure. But I'll tell you, like, there are just things that I'm like, you know what? No, like I remind myself of the things that matter here, like the vision, the mission, and the potential impact that I can have, that we will have can be massive, and ultimately that supersedes any given day you're not feeling great or you're not feeling that is, you had tribulations or trials. Yeah, of course. I mean, if it were easy, everyone would be doing it, but it's not. And so that's ultimately, like, I just like to remind myself of that constantly. But it's really creating a platform for way smarter people, way more competent people to join. And I've seen that already. I mean, the amount of interest, the people that I met in this journey that feel excited about what I'm doing and want to join, that is, like, honestly one of the most rewarding things ever. Having someone believe in what a crazy idea, or maybe not so crazy, that you might have, is incredibly rewarding. I see now why people want to build in the way, like, as like an early stage kind of founder, so to speak.
Yeah, that's awesome. You've gotten to make that shift and be on both sides of the kind of ball, so to speak. And I'm glad you're enjoying it and also getting other people interested in joining the team, because it'll be a really cool intersection of folks, I think, like some very sharp kind of finance minds that are also hopefully crypto native or can become crypto native pretty quickly. And when you find people at the intersection of those two industries, there's usually, a lot of talent and a lot of motivation there. So that's awesome. What headwinds do you see traditional PE facing? I think you tweeted about it before, but I thought it was pretty insightful and kind of maybe like a hidden tailwind for Inversion as you guys get started.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll drop off. I saw the insight because there's a transcript from the Ares Capital Management, one of the largest private equity funds, is public. So it just coincided with a lot of things I'm saying. I want to reference this data point. So there are over 3 trillion of unrealized value across 28,000 unsold companies in the global buyout portfolios. 40% of those investments are 4 years or older. So why is that important? because you had this massive amounts of capital formation over the last 15 years in a record low interest rate environment. And then they went out and pushed the needle on leverage and the multiple that they're paying for these assets. And a lot of that value creation was under the assumption that you would have that financial engineering on the way out, that you had rates stay low and a very thriving capital markets where you can either IPO the business or sell it to a strategic. And when rates are low, people go farther out on the risk spectrum. That's no longer the case. And these funds have a finite life. They have to sell. IRR is the name of the game in private equity. And so any incremental year that you have that business, the IRR is degrading. And so you need to do some other magic, which is operational efficiencies. Not every private equity fund is Apollo or Vista. And so you can only squeeze so much value out of a business. And so what do? Everyone's now talking about AI. We're going to streamline the business. Margins are going to go up. But as investors that the amount TBD, how much value can be realized in what time frame implementing AI. I'm very bullish. I'm excited, but I don't know. I haven't seen like a very substantial proof point yet. It will likely happen. And that's where I think the crypto angle really fits into what I'm doing, which is no one's really thinking about how you cut COGS 50% with on an MVNO by using a DePIN network of distributed hotspots like Helium. No one's thought about it. I've talked to the head of telecom at one of the largest consulting firms in the world. They were unaware of Helium. I've talked to many private equity funds that are specializing in telecom. They're not aware of Helium. I get it. It's small, 27,000 hotspots. Helium has a couple thousand subscribers. Fine. But I think that's really the opportunity. Like I feel an incredible sense of urgency because I think that this is like 1980s when the first leveraged buyouts were invented by KKR. It was really financial wizardry. And they were, cowboys slinging around and breaking apart companies and creating value that way. You had to have a lot of things coincide with that. You had to have junk bonds and Mike Milkman and the insights that he had to provide that capital to do these crazy things back then. The best, most successful buyouts happened in the early days. Then everything was arbed out, and then you had to have really specialized folks like Vistas and these players that had very deep domain expertise. So my vision is that over the next 10 years, every private equity fund will be leveraging crypto to drive value in their portfolio. And if they're not, they're likely going to go out of business or not raise as much money, and the returns will degrade. And that is core to what we're doing at Inversion, which is we can spend more time on that later or just not. But the TLDR is the onboarding funnel of crypto is broken. Every user goes through an exchange and it's speculative energy. And I think we're selling ourselves short as an industry. We can do so much better. We can sell core products and services like a mobile plan that the user doesn't even realize is powered by crypto. But that service is equally or superior to what you're offered in a traditional company like an AT&T or a Verizon. And I think we could do better as an industry onboarding that user that at a minimum is getting a core service and is that you own and like you live with a customer 24/7 when you're delivering a mobile plan. It's an essential service. And then that is a platform to activate that user to use what we just talked about, a stablecoin, which is a checking and money market account at the same time. Meaning you hold USDC, you're earning 4 or 5%. And that combination, I am convinced that is the best funnel to onboard a user into this space. Like we want to onboard 1 billion users, that's how you do it. Not through an exchange. Because the retention on that, the half-life of that user is deeply traumatic that they're not going to come back. No matter what point in the cycle, they're gonna have a traumatic experience. If we ought to do better as an industry.
Definitely.
And that's like, I'm 100% convinced of that. That's like my North Star. That's how we get 1 billion users on chain. The tech is ready. The time is right across a number of facets, regulatory, increasingly so. Like the aperture of the space is there that we just need to execute and run a better go-to-market strategy with a ton of muscle. And that's how I think about Inversion. And again, you complement that with, instead of trying to convince a mobile carrier that they should use stablecoins and become a bank, I'm just going to buy one with a large user base at a very attractive price because they have shitty margins. I get a low multiple on that, and then I run this playbook. And I never, by the way, want to sell that business because that's a perpetual, like this. It's sort of like how Berkshire did it. Like once you own that business, you go on the like once you're able to cut costs, you can play offense to acquire way more users and run that playbook. And then like nothing stops me from becoming the largest telco and fintech in a region in the world. Nothing. If I do this well, nothing will stop. I mean, that's just my, sometimes I feel like in this journey, I didn't think big enough. And I had the good fortune of meeting someone in this journey that was like, why are you not thinking big enough? Like, why not? Like, what's stopping you? Like, seriously, I'm like, I understand that like sometimes we want to be realistic about what we can accomplish. We want to be rational. Um, Although you'd hear me say in prior episodes that the best founders are somewhat irrational and naive in the level of work that it might take them to accomplish this. I think when someone might hear me say that I want to become the largest telco, the largest chain, bigger than Bitcoin, and the largest telco and fintech in the world. And I think there's a there is an opportunity to accomplish those three things. And I guess that makes me somewhat crazy, but I'm okay. Like I'm here to dedicate my entire life. Like this is like a life mission now. Like there's a forever project that I can dedicate the rest of my life to, because if we pull this off, it is at the end of that tunnel, like you really accelerate the adoption of this technology, and I think the world is fundamentally a better place at the end of that journey.
Definitely. Yeah. Good to be ambitious. A couple of things on what you said. It's funny you mentioned the consulting firm, because I was at Boston Consulting Group in 2021 when Helium was just getting started, and I guess I became known as like the it wasn't even DePIN back then, like the crypto real world guy at the firm somehow as like a fresh college graduate. And I remember getting randomly hit up by a team from Dallas who was working with a large telco, and they were like, what do you know about this Helium thing? So I basically put together a slide, put the Helium logo on that. I'll never forget it. So hopefully BCG knows about Helium. I'm not sure though.
Well, it was them.
It was interesting. Well, it didn't make it up the food chain.
That's
I
not
guess.
great. That's
It's
not
also
great.
4 years later. And the other thing is,
I had to say it.
yeah, I think you mentioned, to like 27,000 hotspots. It was that number until 2 or 3 days ago. I'm looking at it right now. It's 59,000 because they just had a brownfield, probably a couple brownfield deployment additions. So that's basically when they go to like someone that has, say, 1,000 Wi-Fi hotspots out there already deployed, and they can, I think, do an over-the-air update and add them to the network. So, I mean, that number is just skyrocketing, right? The chart is vertical, and that's going to be great for you trying to offload, MVNO subscriber data to Helium hotspots versus existing telcos. But I'll kick it to Mahesh for the next question.
Yeah, honestly, it's super interesting because I think the way that you sort of think about the world is so lost on so many people that think they're like at the pinnacle of whether you want to call it intelligence or business or whatever it is. It's like the number of conversations I have with people at places like Harvard Business School, where I'm trying to help co-teach a class right now. Like they will never even try to get their heads around it. And, I think when I sort of think through why that is over the course of my career, I get back to this idea that like when you have a really ambitious vision, people don't really do things because they can't figure out how to. Because finance as a whole is this game of, figuring out what the right assumptions are. And then once you figured out the assumptions, you can start making progress towards going somewhere. And, we're teaching this case at HBS about Helium. There's actually a couple of them right now. And it's amazing the extent to which like people in telecom can't get their head around some of the fundamental assumptions, but then they see it work and they're like, oh my God, like what is going on here? And it's just amazing to sort of see those like 0 to 1 moments of people going like, holy shit, this is actually working. And this is kind of, up and running in a way that is tangible and you can use it and you can get a phone plan. Back to what I was saying earlier, like that's how I got my mom's head around it at the end of the day. It wasn't until like she had a phone plan from Helium and she could kind of understood what was going on behind the scenes that like she could really dig in and say, you know what, some of this stuff makes sense. But to pull it back, the question I want to pose to you is, you're a very methodical thinker. You kind of have this sort of top-down way of looking at the world. But what are some of the assumptions that you think you're making over the next 3 years, 5 years, whatever it may be, whereby on the back end, 5 years later, we're kind of looking back and Inversion is like a top five private equity firm? Like, what do you think the things are assumptions wise that you're getting right that other people are either just refusing not to see or aren't able to, think through in a methodical way?
Well, it's a complex question because we can talk about the assumptions that people at private equity are not making, but perhaps more intimately to the audience of this podcast, I think there's a lot of assumptions that people in crypto are not making. And I think, there's things that we can't control. So let's just dismiss those. The regulatory stuff, encouraging, we can't control it, but I think it's important. The setup is very important. Like the timing is incredibly important. A great idea, bad timing, it's not going to get anywhere. Regulatory stuff has been a blocker. But even putting regulatory aside, the most important assumption that I'm making is looking at something like Uber, for instance. It faced a ton of resistance. Even Airbnb, a ton of resistance. But they were able to prevail at local and state and national levels because they delivered a fantastic experience to the consumer. And that is, again, from first principles, that is the most important thing. Like what you showed to your mother is incredibly important. We need to do that and really double down on that. Um, and so I think the perhaps the things that in my journey, initially a private equity fund, but now a chain to build quite literally a Berkshire model, a perpetual capital machine on chain, to use that treasury value to buy businesses and anchor them on the chain, because I never want to sell these businesses as opposed to having a finite 10-year fund. In that journey, I spoke with many of the crypto foundations, and they manage multiple billions of dollars. They're not being aggressive enough because maybe price goes up, or let's just be honest, the valuations of these networks are predicated on some terminal value assumption, and 99.999% of that value of that chain is predicated on terminal value. But we need to get our shit together. There's like, I don't think there's a sense of urgency that I don't think we have 12 years to deploy this and to get the mainstream adoption. We have 4 years at best.
No, I totally agree.
Now there's nothing to blame. The regulatory environment's clearing up. We're getting regulation. We're getting more clarity on that front. So who are we going to blame if we don't onboard, 200, 300, 400, 500 million active users on chain? We will not have a scapegoat this time. And I think that the sense of urgency is perhaps an assumption that other people are not making. I feel it. I have most of my net worth tied to crypto. This strategy will de-risk my positions, because I think if we get 500 million users on chain, a lot of the protocols that you guys are investors in, or a lot of the protocols that exist today, will benefit from that. Some more than others, I think. I think the percentage that this industry will rely on storytelling to capture value will go down over time, because it will be clear the have and the have-nots, and that will only be purely of delivering true value to the end user, as shown on LTV to CAC, as shown on retention and fundamentals. I know fundamentals are a meme. They will become important. And we're in this state of the world where we're focusing on the technology. It's super important. I think that an assumption that I'm making, and I don't mean to downplay how important that is from a decentralization security, is tech is largely out of the box. We are making these very theoretical and intellectual discussions around what matters the most. And every chain claims the highest TPS and the highest throughput and all this consensus mechanism. And I get it, it's important. I've invested in many of these projects. I think it will always continue to be valuable to stress test the infra, to innovate on that. But a little bit is at this point is like, so what? And I think it's just inverting and saying we just need to to stress test this tech. And the same with when you had the first iPhone, you didn't have really good internet, but it was such a cool product that then it was like you needed that type of iPhone moment to then justify more capex in cellular towers because you really stress test that network. And then like the sequential loops of capex innovation, breakthrough product, capex innovation for more breakthrough products, and then so on. And then like the sixth generation of the iPhone, you had Netflix and Uber and all the other stuff that you're doing, right? Facebook and all this stuff. And so now we've really on the curve of where that is, like we've really gone over the last 12 years on tech, and the tech here can't break. And so that has been instrumental. Probably a lot of people lost patience, but I'm here to tell you that's very much there and ready. We need to really just focus on that like product phase of stress testing the current infra. There is excess demand at block space, not enough demand for it. And I think that to me is just the current state of affairs. But yeah, I don't know if that answered your question. I mean, there's a whole lot other things that I think in this journey, there have been people that have given me insight into perhaps assumptions that I'm making. We could talk about assumptions that I'm making that could be terribly wrong that I think about all the time. Like in a world where this is not successful, there's millions of reasons why that might be.
Of course, yeah. I tend to believe your view of the world in terms of all of this working out. But yeah, I think to your point about beyond a certain baseline level of like you need enough infrastructure in terms of say blockchains and block space to support interesting apps being developed, like beyond that baseline point, which I think we're far beyond, you want infrastructure build out to follow application usage, right? And to be caused by application usage. And so I think it's exciting that you want to do all this and do it on chain, especially. I want to talk about HIP 142, which is the Helium improvement proposal that Inversion Capital submitted to become the second service provider for Helium. So I'm sure you've known about Helium for a while, just being crypto native and given it was big last cycle. But what was the aha moment for you in terms of being like, you know, an MVNO is the first company I want to buy through Inversion, and I want to become a service provider specifically for Helium versus say other decentralized wireless protocols? Like how'd you connect the dots there?
Definitely. I think Helium is the farthest along. And I get inspired what has been happening in the US. And in the conversations with the Helium team, it's like, well, what is stopping you from expanding this internationally? And I appreciate not every market is relevant. And they were like, honestly, we just got too much stuff going on in the US. And I said, okay, then what if I came along and helped you in that journey? And they were like, tell us more. And then that was very instrumental. And I've had just tons of discussions, conversations with the team. And it's been, again, very anchored and inspired by what has been accomplished in the US. I mean, has it been a perfect deployment? No. But in looking at the tokenomics, there's just a lot of stuff that I think is very helpful. I think the Helium, the latest streamlining of the tokenomics has been helpful and moving in the right direction. I get very encouraged by that. But fundamentally, I think DePIN protocols, it is important for everyone and anyone to be able to buy a hotspot and deploy it in their homes. Like do-it-yourself enthusiast, 13,000 or what is it, 27,000 hotspots, right? That was like 13 million of CapEx that was deployed by individuals that homes, more often than businesses, that said, hey, I get interested in this. And then, there's a payback to this $4.99 or $3.99 hotspot. AT&T at $4 or $5, that's like a little over a year, but people get excited, right? That's this ownership in the network kind of element. But that has constant sell pressure in the market, as Bitcoin had in the early days. That was just the nature of the beast. And so what I think is going to be an interesting evolution of what Helium has been able to do in the US as I try to do it in another market is, of course, what makes Helium Helium is that arbitrage in wholesale data rates. $2 to 50 cents. That's what makes Helium Helium. I'm not here to tell you that 50 cents is the right price. I don't think it should be fixed. I think it should be variable. In all my diligence of data market, like telecom markets worldwide, talking to a lot of experts, and also validating it back to the community and the Helium team, I think there's kind of no reason why that pricing shouldn't be variable based on the market. There comes a point where it might be too low, but naturally that's not a market you want to be in anyways, right? But nonetheless, I think going back to Inversion, what we're trying to do is expedite the rollout of hotspots. Instead of taking multiple years, we do it in a month. And the core element of that is we have the MVNO side, and that allows us to be, I think, a stronger steward, like deployer of a network, because we don't have the need to sell those tokens immediately. You need to deploy in a certain size to have, decent subscriber base to justify the capex. And you look at how much I'm saving in COGS. I can very easily deploy $13 million of hotspots in a country like Mexico. And I think that's what will be interesting, as DePIN will always be DePIN because it allows people to buy these devices and be owners in a network. That value promise and value proposition, I think, will always be intact for DePIN. But I do think that you can complement, to your point around brownfield, is you should be going to large deployers. And I think that changes a bit the tokenomics that are important, right? And the network and how you support, kind of the price that is important, right? That's like a supply sink, so to speak. So yeah, we're very encouraged. We in this journey have looked at a number of markets from the UK, Canada, Mexico, Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, New Zealand, Australia. It's really hard to come by the data because it's very guarded. But we've been able to assess, and I think that's given us a lot of direction in which market we want to go after. And there's a very concrete, actionable opportunity that we hope to basically, if we do this right, I think we more than double the size of the network.
100%. Yeah. For what it's worth, I see basically no downside to this proposal, and I see massive, massive upside. And that's the kind of, convex outcomes I think you want to try to put yourself in position to win, especially as, thinking of like the Helium community here, for instance, right? Like if this works out like we think it can, you can just drive a lot more data usage and H&T burn through the network. And, there should be 10 service providers. There should be 50. Like every country on earth should be kind of like pushed forward in the same way that Helium Mobile has pushed forward the US, and hopefully you're going to do in some other countries. What else needs to happen for this to get passed? Like, what are the next steps? Obviously the HIP needs to go up for vote and get passed, but beyond that, like, do you plan to deploy your own hotspots? Do you plan to work with boots on the ground? Would you potentially like transition MVNO subscribers to Helium Mobile, or would you just like offload onto Helium hotspots? Like, curious next steps.
More likely offloading, because we're buying an MVNO. We're just you don't want to change many things. You just use that brand distribution, but you're just offloading, right? This idea of it is invisible to the user. Offload as much as possible. The other thing that I've been very focused on is finding a big distribution partner that will allow me to deploy these hotspots day one. So like the largest convenience store operator. Like these large players at brownfield, like you go in there, they allow you to deploy it as quickly as possible. And that's really a big part of the strategy. And for them, it's pure profit, right? You're sharing some of the rewards with them, and they like it. It's a very unobtrusive device. It sits there. It's been very encouraging. A lot of people in the community, like was it the LongFi or the Long Hash?
Yeah,
LongFi
LongFi
guys. I spoke with them, and they said, "Hey, listen, we did the deployment in Oaxaca and outside Mexico City. Is there an opportunity for us to do it?" I'm like, "Absolutely, there is an opportunity." I mean, like you guys know this, like servicing the hotspots, maintaining the uptime in the hotspots there's going to be a lot of opportunity for people to help us in this process.
You're right up Connor's alley here. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I don't know if you know this, but Connor was one of the OG Helium deployers out of a company called Hexagon Wireless that was doing what LongFi did like 5 years ago.
There you go. Well, Connor, if you want to expand that to other markets, we should chat.
I don't think the
100%.
first
Yeah,
iteration went super well for what it's worth. It was maybe a little too early.
it was very early. Yeah, but no, I mean, I'm always interested in tinkering with new DePIN gear, and obviously still a big Helium community supporter, bag holder, all the above.
We got to acquire the asset. If it's not that asset, I think there's the nice thing about MVNOs is it's a very fragmented market. And you can acquire. I get excited about acquiring like, an MVNO with like 10, 20, 30, 40 million subscribers, and then like rolling that playbook. Why? Because the level of effort's almost the same. Again, it goes back to, if I'm going to deploy hotspots and get the density in a country like Mexico, I want to make sure that, I can do that and offload, and it's material, right? And the cost savings are material at scale. Otherwise, you're in this sort of conundrum of how many hotspots can I deploy based on on the offloading and all these assumptions. It's really that assumption, right? The bigger the MVNO, the better to justify immediate rollout nationwide, or sufficient footprint across clusters of where most of the subscribers are or will be.
Take the biggest swings possible. No, honestly, you're doing us all a service because it's amazing advertising for everyone else in the crypto ecosystem if just a couple of these work. So it feels like it's in one of those like proof of concept moments of like we just kind of need one of these things to really, really work and show the utility. And I mean, I keep coming back to especially whether it's DePIN or more broadly, like I'm a big believer in these community-based business models of, letting everyone get involved, letting real people sort of create just huge amounts of value, letting everyone sort of become a bit of an entrepreneur, even if it's, with one day's worth of pay, whereby they can actually build something not just for themselves, but for their family that creates not just economic value, but societal value. And, DePIN is kind of ground zero for that for me in particular. So yeah, I'm excited about all of it and excited about what you're doing at Inversion. So one last question for you, if you don't mind, before we wrap, which is, again, theme of some of this podcast and a lot of what you seem to do is just big swings, really sort of going for it and having the right mental model and set of assumptions whereby if things start to go wrong, you're quickly able to fix it. Do you think about the cycle at all? Because, especially recently, last month, just the timeline has been crazy of like the Trump meme coin launch and then everyone thinking about the cycle and everything being over. Like, how do you really tune out the noise, or do you, when you think about these kinds of projects? Because they're long-term projects.
Yeah, it does. I mean, it reinforces the vision, which is we need to focus on non-speculative use cases. Like, yeah, Nasdaq on the blockchain is great, but when 2/3 of your fees come from pure speculation, I think we ought to we just it reinforces the main problem that we have, which is go to market. The tech is ready. We can absorb a launch of a presidential meme coin on the weekend and absorb that volume and on ramping, but the retention's not there. We can offer them way more than a meme coin. We're selling ourselves short so much in this industry, and I get it. But speculation is incredible energy. We need to route it, we need to capture it, and we need to focus on the retention. And there are core products and services like DePIN, like Andrina, and many other DePIN projects like DePIN plus stablecoins. It's the 1-2 punch that will take us to the promised land, which is accelerate the adoption of this technology in a way that is unequivocally proves to people that this is what we've been telling them it will be. It is an extension of the internet. It's an upgrade pack. It will make people's lives faster, better, cheaper. I'm not asking you to believe it now. I'm not asking you to understand how that will work. All I'm saying is within the next 4 years, if we pull this off, you will feel it. No, people don't know how the internet works. They don't know how an airplane works. They can't draw a bicycle. Let's stop assuming that people are going to understand how this shit works. It's complicated. It requires understanding of 10 disciplines. It took me like 5 years to be able to explain it somewhat cohesively to my parents so that they didn't think that I was crazy. Probably still think that I'm crazy, but that's fine. You know what I mean? Like, I just think that that's the cycle doesn't matter. This is a secular trend, and the same with it. Like software as a service came and really transformed how businesses bought and utilized technology from CapEx to OpEx. Like software, there were key moments. The email, software as a service, and smartphones were 3 pivotal moments of the internet's evolution from a consumer standpoint. And I just think that like through 1999 all the way to today, there was like multiple like macro crises during those moments. But you just kind of believe that the internet was going to transform how we organize as people and communicate and allow us to do all these things. So you just march on. And like you guys are here, you believe it, you see it. We're very early. It's kind of painfully early, but you believe it. There's early insights like Helium, like those proof points give me a ton of conviction. Stablecoin adoption, what Nubank is doing in Brazil with stablecoins, the uptake rate of that. Man, you best believe that everyone in this world wants access to tokenized dollars.
Yeah. No,
We need to just run that playbook aggressively and leading with a mobile plan. You're talking about the 2 most essential kind of services other than healthcare for people and education. It's like mobile, 24/7, banking, abstract it away from them. Let's go. Like that's it. I don't know. I'm not afraid to like leak this idea to the public. I hope other people do it in other places. We'll all benefit. It's like win-win, but play a long-term game. Um, but yeah, that obviously, you got to be well capitalized for that, and hire a bunch of really smart people, and I'm doing that. So yeah.
Well, when you turn out right a year from now, we would love to have you back on the pod to sort of talk through how it all played out. But in the meantime, very excited about your vision. Truly are aligned with it in terms of how not only it can be an amazing business model and business, but how it could also just be transformational for people at the ground level. And so, with that, would love to just last thing, where can people find you if they want to learn more, if they're trying to get involved? Where would you point them?
I'm building in the open. So at inversion_cap, or my Twitter profile, like at Santiago Roel. I'm constantly tweeting about what I'm doing, and most of it now is just inversion and what we're doing there. So that's probably the best way to get like yesterday I posted a bit more details. I'm hiring the first two roles at Inversion, a CTO and a chief of staff, and so there's more info in that blog post. Maybe we can link it in the show notes. But yeah, very excited. We'll love to bring on, again, way more talented people to the organization, and I'm sure they're out there. I'm sure some of you guys are listening. So if fits the bill, please reach out. We'll love to talk to you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much